is it that you can't get along? Well, this year's a census year. And so we're now into the final phases of redistricting across the country. And here's what happens. Depending on which state legislature is in control, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, what happens is during the redistricting, population moves, and you have to get to your 704,000 citizens in each district. And so they begin to gerrymander districts. And so over the course of history, blue districts, Democratic-leaning or Democratically dominated districts, become more blue. And red districts, Republican districts, become more red. And as a result, the members of Congress that the American people send from those districts are either very, very Democrat or very, very Republican, because that's who lives there. And I will tell you that the thing that maybe surprised me the most when I got to Washington, D.C., is that your Congress, the 535 members of Congress, look exactly like the American people. We have men and women. We have Hispanic and Caucasian and African American. We have young people. We have old people. We have tall people and thin people. We have bald people and people with hair. You know, and we've got some smart folks and some not so smart folks. And it looks just like all of us. And so the conflict that you see, the partisan bickering that goes on, is a result because the American people are conflicted. And at some point, as the sovereign rulers of our country, you know, in 1776, our forefathers cast off the shackles of a sovereign king and replaced it with a sovereign people. And I think the American people need to understand how much say they actually do have in all of this. But there's a lot of gimmicks, there's a lot of tricks, and there's a lot of game playing that goes on just here in Wisconsin if we look at the redistricting. For the most part, we have 3 Democratic members, Gwen Moore, Ron Kind, and Tammy Baldwin. Their 3 congressional districts got more blue. So those districts have more Democrats as a percent than they ever had before. And as a result, Paul Ryan's district and Congressman Petri's district, Congressman Duffy's district got more red. As blue voters were moved out of their district into those districts, as red voters were moved from those districts to their district. Interesting enough, the 8th district of Wisconsin, the district that we're in, stayed truly purple. If we look at it and really drill down based on voting records, this district is 50.81% Republican. So it's nearly 50-50. And if you take the independent vote and grab that 10% piece right in the middle, they kind of go both ways, it's almost 40, 45, 45, and 10. And so if I seem somewhat confused, because we're all confused, we've not come to total agreement yet on where we're going and what we want to do and how we want to be. But here's what I know. A district like mine forces me to be more pragmatic, and I think this is very important, forces me to be more pragmatic, and forces me to be more thoughtful and more respectful in how I speak to people. Because at any given moment, it's likely that I will be speaking to someone who really disagrees or is from the totally opposite political ideology than I am. And so we will have a better dialogue in this country if we could reform the redistricting process to make more districts in play, to make more districts purple to reflect the American people more accurately than how we currently do. But that's a significant reform, because everything in politics is about politics, and everything in politics is about power ultimately. And so, as someone who just wants to go there and make a better America for the next generation, for our kids and grandkids, it is a uniquely frustrating place to work, but it's also a uniquely inspiring place to work. There's something that happens to you when you get up in the morning, you walk outside of your office, and there's the U.S. Capitol. And these are the same hallways, the very same hallways that men like Abraham Lincoln walked. And you know, it's tragic today that the American people have such a disregard for Congress. Now, maybe Congress has earned it, but it's tragic. When we look at our brave history and the men and women that walked those halls throughout the history of this country, that we've gotten to this place We need change, don't we? We really do. And this meeting like this is part of that change. Where thoughtful Americans come together and have a thoughtful conversation about what we're up against, so that we can come to find some conclusions about what America should look like for our kids and our grandkids. And for all of you who are grandparents, I'm a grandparent as well. I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old grandson. Had a chance to see them on Easter Sunday. It was good to see them. They live in Nashville, Tennessee, so they're not close to home. But it was a treat for me to be with them, and I know you, like me, but whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you love your children, you love your grandkids, and you want something better for them. And if we want something better for them, we must come up with a conclusion and prepare for this. Let's go to the survey. Rick, let's go ahead and walk through some of these questions. Let's talk a little bit about where we're at. We're going to close out the national debt clock. You've kind of seen that. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at this survey. Now, you don't have to answer these questions out loud, but I want you to, if you have a piece of a pen or paper with you, if you've got your survey in front of you, you can kind of work with me as we go along. Which of the following will the federal government spend the most on in 2012 in the 2012 U.S. federal budget? Is it our national defense? Is it health care, Medicare and Medicaid, interest on the public debt, foreign aid, Social Security, unemployment compensation, earmarks and pork barrel spending, or welfare? Which of the following will the federal government spend the most on in the 2012 U.S. federal budget?
Defense is very close to health care.
What's that?
Defense is almost exactly
the
same as number 2.
Yeah, very, very close. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Healthcare is number 1. Healthcare is number 1. Consumes roughly 17 to 20% of the nation's GDP. And because the government is heavily involved in healthcare through a bunch of different programs, the number 1 thing we spend money on at the federal treasury is healthcare. It's the biggest thing. Question number 2. Our gross domestic product is an economic term that measures the size of America's economy in dollars. As you may know, the United States carries a national debt. By the end of 2012, the total federal debt is projected to be approximately what percent of the United States GDP? Now, GDP is the total amount of our overall production, our total amount of everything that we produce in this country. Is it 50%, 66%, 75%, 90%, or 100%? Let's go ahead to the next slide and we'll show you. It's 100% of GDP. 100%. Our nation's GDP is projected to be 15.2 trillion. In rough numbers, you saw the debt clock running at 15.7 trillion. So we're just a little bit over 100% today. And so we now have a debt that's as large as our entire productivity.
Where do you get your source from?
Oh,
what's that?
we're asking folks not to
the sources, and I'll be happy to provide all the sources for everybody, but we know what the GDP is. It's 15.2 trillion. We know what the national debt is. It's 15.7 trillion. So it's fairly simple math to come at this number. If anybody wants all this